Okay. Hey, James.
Hey, Adrian.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for coming back so soon.
It's always an honor to be on your show.
Oh my
Thank you
gosh.
for having me.
It's my honor. See, I know how profound and deep you are. Everybody's, getting reacquainted with you or getting to know you.
Well, thank you. That's really an honor. People know who you are too. Your essence, your aura.
Oh,
It really shines through.
thank you. Thank you. I gosh, there's so much with this topic of resistance. And I think the first thing I want to ask you is what was your thought when I brought up the idea of talking about this topic?
Yeah. So my first thought, once I understood what you were saying, it actually linked to something I had been listening to on a podcast. Right on this podcast, the person was saying the fact that there's a part of us that yearns for abundance. It's a sign that we know that's our natural inheritance, right? So, in the same way, the fact that we're realizing that there is a way of oneness that goes beyond the duality, oppression and opposition that we're seeing in the world, that in and of itself is evidence that we remember something greater.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling you that I had this dream. I mean, I hear about resistance a lot. Definitely I listen to Abraham Hicks and that's her main theme is understanding resistance, but I've heard, other spiritual teachers bring it up as well. And I had this dream last week, I think, and I don't know, it came in so clear for like 10 seconds, you
Mm,
know? Like I really understood. And so then I started really contemplating it and meditating about it and just reading and I can't say, hey, I'm 100% there, but I do have more of, in terms of my spirit, more of an understanding around it. And it's that if we're resistant to something, there has to be something for us to be resistant to.
mm-hmm.
And for me, that thing that we're resistant to is pure love,
Hmm.
and all that the pure love of God,
Mm-hmm.
for me in my path, it's the pure love of God and all that that brings and, understanding who we are as a holy loved child of God.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the thing is, we can bring up whatever it is that we're resistant to.
Mm-hmm.
It ties back to that, and there is no opposite of God's love. If we just go with the premise, like let's say somebody doesn't agree, just go with the premise of God is love. And so many people are so resistant to the idea of love.
Mm-hmm.
If we go with, okay, just for the sake of conversation, God is love. Well, there's no opposite to that.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? You're
Mm-hmm.
done. You're
Because
done.
what is real can have no opposites, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So which way, how do you want to go? I have things. Anything you want to share first around this?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I really resonate with that, right? And in the same way, it's interesting because those who operate in fear appear to be opposed to love. But as we're talking about what is real can have no opposites, and the love of God, which is absolute reality, can't be opposed by fear, which is just a relative illusion, which ultimately passes by. But the love of God is constant. And so I'm curious to hear more of your reflections around this because I'm really enjoying and appreciating your insights on the love of God.
Oh, thank you. I don't know where to go first. I was sharing with you the other day how in A Course in Miracles we will read and we'll hear in conversation, if it's not love, it's a call for love.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was thinking about with all of that being the case is, if it's not love, it's fear. But the
Mm.
opposite of fear is love.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a resistance I get fascinated with the people that I talk to, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's in my personal life, who are very resistant to the idea of love. And you know what? I was thinking about something just a little while ago. So, one of my good friends, she was on the podcast and she was talking about how joy is our birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Joy is our birthright.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I have said since I was a teenager, young adult, I have said to the men in my life, whether, it's family or close friends, you get to be happy.
Hmm.
And I have heard even, as recently as last year or this year, men being so in conversation, being so resistant to the idea that they get to be happy.
Hmm.
And it's just, well, what if you just accept that idea
Mm-hmm.
that you can be happy? Then what?
Mm-hmm.
There's a real I'm thinking that because the conversations I've had with men, but I've also had a conversation with a close friend who's a woman recently, and it wasn't that she didn't think she could be happy, but just the idea of God loves everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and God does love everyone.
God does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I've just been aware of, just the resistance to the idea. And I wrote down, without fear, there is only love. God has always existed. God is love and God has always existed. Um, Everything, like even cynicism, anger, hate, fear is a resistance to love, worry,
Mm-hmm.
even cynicism. But love is all there is
Hmm.
in reality. And that's why I was thinking about to have peace be peace, to
Mm-hmm.
have all, give all to all, from A Course in Miracles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I really like all of what you're sharing, right? And going, and also just to talk about A Course in Miracles as you're so beautifully bringing it in, there's a workbook lesson that says God being love is also happiness. So, so as we're integrating the truth that God's love is so unconditional that there's enough of it for everyone. And it's funny, right? Because the love of God loves us all as one being, right? Just one infinite beloved child of God, which is hard for even me to grasp my mind around in this very finite illusion, right? But there's that part of me in here that does know it. I can't put it into words, but as I'm talking about it with you, I know that this is true more than I can put in this limited frame. And along the lines of what you're saying, so the resistance to love and joy are actually quite synonymous, right? Because the Course describes the joy and love of God as being synonymous because the natural existence of God is just a nature that's fully positive in all regards. So you name it, it's just that conglomeration of unity. And around the aspect of men having a hard time letting in joy, I think it has a lot to do with conditioning in the first place that just teach us, us as men to just off to our emotions. And I often compare that to, say, for example, a city like Seattle, right? So, it's a cloudy climate oftentimes in the very same cloud cover that perhaps keeps the temperature from getting so super warm, it also stops the temperature from going so super cold. So it sort of holds it in this place of rather monotony, right? Where you might have a
Mm.
small swing of temperatures. And I like to compare that to similar to the spectrum of emotions.
Mhm.
When we're told to shut off our emotions, essentially, we might be able to prevent ourselves, or at least say to ourselves, we're preventing ourselves from getting very low. But in that very process, we're also not getting very high. So it
Mhm.
becomes this sort of monotony thing where the sadness is not really very well expressed, but almost just operating as emotional shells, like kind of dead to the big emotional spectrum. The joy is also quite limited.
Yeah. Wow. And that being a place where you're just kind of in the middle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's really a place of numbness, right? And actually, it's
Mm.
funny because being numb to all the sadness that's there actually doesn't stop it from being there. And it actually takes the honesty to really acknowledge what's there in order to be able to step into that real joy, which is
Mhm.
an actuality or a natural inheritance.
Mhm. Wow. I want to share something that I feel like speaks to this. I had mentioned Abraham Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I generalized some of what she said, and then she says something that I feel kind of really hones in on this.
Hmm.
So I wrote down how joy is our birthright. And she was making the point of how we can be told from other people something else. Like we could be, aligned, on our path, but then we might hear someone else's voice, you
Hmm.
know, someone close to us or someone we work with, might say something else. And they might tell us that we don't have a right to choose.
Hmm.
We don't, and I've heard that in different ways, because I have an unorthodox path, you know,
Hmm.
when it comes to my personal life, when it comes to my professional life. And so people can have an opinion when we're not going along traditional norms.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we hear that we don't have if we get the feeling that we don't have a right to choose what we choose, then we think we have to choose another path which is resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Although we might do it because we're hearing, that voice, well, I should be doing this,
Hmm.
which is resistant to our natural, what our spirit is naturally telling us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, um, you are an extension of that which is source, which I call God.
Mm-hmm.
You will never be apart from that flow. You'll never be apart from it. It will always flow to you and through you, but you will always have power and control.
Hmm.
She says, how you let it in at any moment in time and how you deprive yourself from it is your doing. When you let it in, so she's saying that we have a whole range, as humans, it's our choice. Obviously we have like divine free will. So it's our choice what we choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
She says, when you let it in, you thrive. You are cheerleaders. You're sure footed. You breathe deeply. Everything feels good, interesting, provocative.
Hmm.
Versus if we choose otherwise, you're defensive, you're afraid, unsure, unworthy, depressed. You feel anger and frustration, a myriad of emotions. And then she says, don't question your value. Rather, say to yourself, what would I rather feel?
Hmm.
And that we have the choice to, she's saying, ask ourselves, do I want to love this person or do I want to hate this person? Which
Mm-hmm.
feels best to me?
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that really says it all.
Mm-hmm. Because it is a choice, right? And as I'm hearing you
Mhm.
say that, I'm thinking also about A Course in Miracles workbook lesson, the power of decision is my own. And of course,
Mhm.
because God is perfect love, God also loves us, even as you could say, even in these dream forms that we're experiencing, where we're almost seeing ourselves as if we could be separate from God, right? Even in this sense, God honors our autonomy enough to still let us choose the love of God. And it's funny because it's not really much of a choice, right? And I've also been even reflecting on what you've been saying about the irony of resisting the very love we are, right? Because still, the resistance of love, which is fear, of course, in Miracles, still calls a call for love. So even in trying to resist the very thing that we are, I guess how could it be that we could both resist the very thing and be the thing at the same time? It's
Mm.
almost as if we are. That in and of itself is a call for love because it's like we're asking love to remind us to let in the very thing that we are and that we're trying to push away in a very counterintuitive kind of way.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And sometimes when I have been feeling really down, I just try to keep going forward, and I will, like when you say we're asking, it's almost asking love to remind us.
Mhm.
And that's what I go searching for.
Mhm.
I'll go to spiritual teachers on YouTube, who resonate for me, so that I can hear what's true, or maybe I'll hear their story. I remember one time I was really down, and I went and I cannot find it now, but I went and I found this more than 2-hour YouTube of Wayne Dyer just
Mm.
talking about his journey,
Mm.
and it was just, I listened to it over a course of days,
Mm.
and it was so much what I needed. I needed my spirit to be fed. And so even though I was feeling the resistance, before I went looking, I still went looking for something to feed me, to bring
Mhm.
me back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of being an aware soul such as yourself, right? Because having this human experience, it is inevitable that we are going to find times that we are resistant to love, right? I had a moment of that even this morning. But I think that having the awareness around the fact that we're resisting or appear to be resisting love at that time, we can still let it in. And we can also have compassion for the parts of ourselves that were maybe conditioned like you said, to think that we don't have the power to choose, right? Because that message that you were told, it didn't come from you. It was from people, I would imagine, who grew up with such a fearful mindset, who were told that similarly by society and probably maybe even other family, that, that they're almost governed by that fear.
Mhm.
But for you to be in a place of being able to both acknowledge the resistance, which oftentimes is external conditioning, and still
Mhm.
go towards love, that really is the work. Because of course, in Miracles always makes it clear that it's not a matter of if we get triggered or if we get afraid and tempted to turn away, but when. It's not so much about what happens during the trigger. It's what we choose to do, and the love we still choose to turn to when times do seemingly get hard on the outside.
Mhm. Would you be comfortable sharing what you felt this morning?
Of course. So this morning I was doing a meditation. I was in a meditation circle with some of my now graduated cohort from the Naropa University. And there's this professor who's now teaching, or I should say leading a meditation group of a bit of a sangha of those of us who are or were in the program. And as I was doing the meditation, it was interesting for me to both connect to myself as unconditional love and see like the little parts of myself, like the little ego, fearful, conditioned parts of James, as he was actually like really scared to like really just be sitting in that much love. So I was able to notice resistance to receiving some of that unconditional love. And as we were meditating out on the deck of this person's, yard, um, I was sitting there, in, largely in a blissful state of meditation, and the wind was blowing rather hard this morning, and someone put a blanket over me. And of course that in some way is like the Holy Spirit's comforter, right? And at the same time I could still feel a bit of ego resistance to receiving. But being in that place, it just opened up the opportunity for me to remember teachings such as God is a love in which I forgive myself, and just saying those kinds of mantras. And really just meeting those fearful parts of me with unconditional love and reminding them, yeah, with your conditioning growing up, you weren't taught that it was okay, and if you were taught that if you are in a moment where times are good, you got to watch out for that shoe to drop, and don't get too caught up into a good moment, because when times get hard again, you're gonna be even more disappointed. But as I was doing that, I was able to realize that those voices were actually trying to serve to lower my vibration, which was actually very high and generally joyous at the time.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. And I'm thinking about allow. That's what's coming to me, is that so often, myself included, we might be resistant to just allow a thing to happen, and
Mhm.
or make space for the thing to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've been thinking recently, because I've been hearing it from like Neville Goddard. I heard it listening to Wayne Dyer about allowing the thing that we want to meet the allowing the desire to meet the consciousness,
Mhm.
of it happening.
Mhm.
and that everything that we want already exists, and it's
Mhm.
allowing it to come to us.
Mhm.
And sometimes that can be hard to believe sometimes when we just feel like, well, God, what else should I do? Like I may not even be in actions. It may just be that I'm in a state of accepting that, this can happen. I can be in faith, but it's still not here yet. So
Mhm.
that can be hard, but it's still, our sense of time is something too.
Mhm.
We're trying to put
Mhm.
parameters on that. Yeah.
You're right. And I always love it when you talk about Neville Goddard, right? Because he was almost like, what was he, maybe 20 years before Course in Miracles? But essentially he's giving like a new thought way of looking at the Bible, which is actually very resonant with the Course in Miracles. And I love the way it resonates, right? He talks a lot about the wish fulfilled. Essentially, essentially when I hear the wish fulfilled, I think that aligns a lot with God's will for me as perfect happiness, because essentially we don't have to beg for that wish to be fulfilled. We are an aspect of God itself. So in that regard, we if our imagination and if our willingness, if our faith is strong enough, we can realize that there's really nothing dividing us from our wishes. Neville
Mhm.
Goddard also talked about the promise, and essentially the promise, from my understanding of it, is that we're all destined to awaken in God. He even says that we all have a determined time of awakening, much like A Course in Miracles. And the promise is essentially when we get to that point of realizing ourselves as a perfectly unconditionally loved child of God, right? And
Yeah.
so, and that's much like A Course in Miracles promise, that a happy outcome to all things is sure.
Yeah. And I believe that. I think I get stumped around what am I doing wrong? Like sometimes
Mm,
I know, sometimes it's clear to me when I'm could do differently, but
mm-hmm,
other times I don't know what I'm doing, or I might not know how to get out of my own way.
mm-hmm,
So I'll pray on that, but doesn't mean that I'm necessarily getting out of my own way.
mm,
So that can be because I do believe and know that, I'm a holy loved child of God like each and every one of us. So
mm-hmm,
what am I doing? What am I blocking? How do I stop, you know, how do I do something differently to make way and allow?
mm-hmm,
What can I do differently? And sometimes I know and sometimes I don't know.
mm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's true, right? I have times when I don't know too. And I
Yeah.
think that's interesting because you talk about time. Time can be very, I mean, I myself personally find time very frustrating, right? Because in the illusion of time, things can seem to be really hard. And sometimes it doesn't do a lot to know that a happy outcome to all things is sure, right? And that perfect divinity has promised us if we feel like we're just in the throes of a nightmare.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was I was thinking about time. Well, I came to think about time because I was thinking about how, when it comes to God, I can accept that.
Hmm.
You know that uh phrase, I always get this wrong unless I'm in church.
Mm-hmm.
Always has been, always will be,
Mm-hmm.
basically. So I
Mm-hmm.
can get the always will be,
Mm-hmm.
but the always has been is the like there's no beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I can get the no ending, but no beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually put it into AI and I said, "Explain this." What do you have to say? And so it basically was saying that, because I have a frame of mind around time, like our
Mm-hmm.
human selves, it's like we're trying to picture something through our human brain,
Mm-hmm.
which teaches us there's a beginning. Like our brain doesn't want to allow us to believe that there's no beginning, that something always existed. But then if I go to consciousness, for me, then I can grasp it. If I just say, okay, consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
see that always being there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I really relate to what you're saying, and I'm thinking about Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 169. By grace I live, by grace I am released, by grace I give, by grace I will release. somewhere along that text, there's a part where Jesus is essentially saying that the time for all of our awakening has already been appointed. But then he says something in his occasionally, in his humor, he says something to the effect of, "What's the point in going on longer, talking about something longer that you don't understand?" So that there are certain things that ego minds at the veiled level just don't get, and that's okay because it's like you said, when we
Yeah.
really tap into that consciousness, then there is just that knowing, and I'm relating to what you're saying too because when I have those moments when clarity comes through, enough for the doubt to momentarily subside. In those moments when I'm sitting in the unconditional love, even if I'm still also aware of ego parts that are resisting it, it's just a very clear knowing, like that this has always been here. And
Yes.
and there's actually not a point where God ends and the child begins. So in that case, it's even I've always been here. And so it's just a moment of how could I have ever thought that I was anything less than this? And I was stressing over so many things and wondering, will I ever be in this state? And really, really realizing that enlightenment in that sense is not even such a term, right? It's like the enlightenment is just the realization that I have always been here. I have always been, I always will
Mhm.
be.
Mhm. Yeah. I definitely relate to that. I
Mm,
definitely relate to that. It's funny because I'm going back to that thought about duality and different parallel universes, if that's
mm-hmm,
for lack of a better word, because sometimes I think about like when did my evolution start,
mm-hmm,
inside.
mm-hmm,
But I know something that I've seems like has always been there, like this sense of either I did this before or there's something else going on. Maybe it might come from maybe if, say, something happened special on this date right here, last year, then I feel like it's happening again, like in some other realm,
mm-hmm.
and so I don't know, that thought about just parallel universes or realities or life, whatever we want to put to it.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying here. And I myself have had a lot of insights on time lately. And I was actually having this conversation with a medium of mine who's also an energy healer. And so bear with me on this one, but so first of all, given that A Course in Miracles says we're just mentally reviewing what has already gone by, this actually means that what we think we're doing right now is actually a pre-recording. And so from that perspective, I like to when I have the faith, I like to assuredly remind myself I'm actually just watching the story of how a seeming ego character just awakened to the realization, I always have been, I am, and I always will be. And so we're essentially just watching that pre-recording of how we came to the realization of being all that is. But along those lines of time being an illusion, right? It also means that the quote unquote, past lives are happening in the present moment just as much as our present lives are. And from a place of retro causality where the past is actually influenced by the future, and our present moments are actually rewriting the past, it means that as we're choosing love in this incarnation, we're also rewriting the timelines of other incarnations, which aligns with what Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. I believe in one of the miracle principles where he says miracles have the ability to collapse time and space.
Mhm.
So get this right. Lately, as I've been sometimes having like flashes of past lives, I've had this really trippy thought that actually the lifetime where I achieved enlightenment was perhaps it was 1500 years ago, right? Imagine it was 1500 years ago. I was this, I don't know, I was this like some kind of realized yogi who was doing these practices, who was aware of all that is. And now sometimes I actually have the weird feeling that I'm essentially 1500 years in quote unquote in the future. And yet this is a prequel to the storyline of how I already awakened 1500 years
Mhm.
ago.
Yeah. Wow.
If that makes any sense.
It does. Well, you're having a prequel, meaning before 1,500 years ago,
Mhm.
of how you already awakened.
Mhm.
So, like, you're beforehand and you're getting a preview to your awakening, which
Mhm.
happened 1500 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I I do get it.
Hmm.
You know, I might feel like, "Oh, I don't get it." I get it. I
I
get
can tell. I can
I'm
tell
I'm
that you do.
I'm thinking, like, so many things. There's 2 things, and I don't wanna lose my train of thought. In a second, I wanna go bring that to well, bring what we're saying back to resistance, but I just when you were talking, I don't know if I shared this. I don't think I shared it when we did the live, but I had this awareness. First of all, let me rewind. Summer 2024,
Hmm.
I went on a cruise, and it went to, Jamaica was one of the places it stopped,
Hmm.
and so, it was, like, so profound for me. Like, the first place we went to was this falls that I always forget the name of, but a lot of people have been there. It's well known, I can't think of the name of it, but
Niagara Falls?
no, that's in
No.
New York.
Okay.
This is in Jamaica.
Oh, this is in Jamaica. Okay.
Yeah, and so you're like you walk on these rocks and you're, like, walking as a team, like, holding arms. You're, like, in this long line and you're holding arms. This is a prelude to what I'm really gonna say.
Hmm.
But, if you walk on a certain part of the rock, like, some of the rocks they're big, like boulder rocks. If
Oh.
you walk on, like, a dark, shiny part, then that's slippery. You're not supposed to step on that and you'll
Oh.
fall, and which
Yeah.
I did. And so, but eventually we got to this falls part where you go up under these falls, and I'm telling you, it was so much what I needed. It was
Mhm.
like God was just pouring everything into me for
Mhm.
like, 60 seconds. It was
Mhm.
just beautiful.
Mhm.
And so then anyway, we left there, we went about 45 minutes away to this cave. It's the falls is called Dunn's River Falls. That's what it's called. Because a
Mhm.
lot of people have been there, or if I bring it up and I say, "I can't remember," and they'll say, "Do you mean Dunn's River?" So that's what it is. So
Mhm.
anyway, we go to this cave, which is a 45-minute drive away, and the cave, at one point in time, we were told that slaves, walked through it to escape.
Mhm.
And so and in the '90s, someone owned it, and they had it as, like, a nightclub.
Mhm.
There was, like, a stage sort of carved out, in this cave, but if they turned out all the lights, and there were bats in there and stuff that you
Mhm.
could see, but if they turned out the lights, you could see how pitch black it was for, people to be walking through if you
Mhm.
were trying to escape. What was getting me was the rock formations on the walls of the cave. I was seeing expressions,
Mhm.
like facial expressions, and I took
Mhm.
photos, and it was like I was seeing emotion coming out of these facial expressions that I was
Mhm.
seeing on the walls of the cave. It
Mhm.
was just everything was just so cathartic from, like I said, the falls that I mentioned, and then here I am in another space, and I feel like I'm seeing the pain
Mhm.
of the people who walked through this cave.
Mhm.
And since then, a lot of times when I look at Black men, I see royalty.
Mhm.
Feel like I'm seeing who they were in the past,
Mhm.
and I actually saw that maybe the year before, like earlier last year, not even like so that was the summertime. I witnessed that in my nephew, my younger nephew.
Mhm.
I looked at him and I could see it, and then it just after, going through that cave, I just attribute it to that. Like something happened, I had an experience in that cave.
Mhm.
And and then, after that, I it's like when I look at Black men in particular, I feel like I see so often like this aura of royalty.
Mhm.
And so that's why, that was one of the things that was bringing me to what you were just saying.
Mhm.
Like it was really resonating what you were describing about yourself
Hmm.
1,500 years ago. Yeah.
And what you're saying is really resonating with me too. It sounds a lot like you've heard of the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like that, right? It's like in the same way that when you're in the cave, especially with the lights off, there's something about having lights off that can allow you to kind of see a little bit more beyond the veil, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing imprints of all the pain there. And in a similar token, you look at Black Man and you're seeing royalty there, you know, of the lineage of possibly of past lives too, but of
Mhm.
lineage of generations beforehand. And it also sounds like it's one of those powerful messages, right? Because it kind of also ties into we may not know just even as a whole, right? As a child of God, we might not know the royalty that we are. And it's like if we only knew what is our natural inheritance and being seen in that loving kind of way of what we came from and what we are, that could make all the difference. And
Yeah.
also though what you're saying kind of I get excited when I hear about topics of time, right? Because have you heard of this term glitch in the matrix?
Mm-mm.
A glitch in the matrix is essentially a term. I think it was actually coined in the Matrix, where I think they talked about it in that, or inspired by the Matrix at the very least. And essentially, in times when people can go beyond the present moment, right? That they may see the past sometimes in an area, they may see a future event. There actually are reports of people um, years after World War II actually seeing events take place in certain sites. And so for you to be able to look in the cave and see the same pain that was faced by people who were slaves there and trying to earn their much needed freedom, it just goes to show that you're in touch with that part that does know all time is happening
Mhm.
at once.
Yeah. And I feel like, we all of us, whatever culture we're from, like we really so often will deny that part of ourselves. And it's such a contradiction if, the majority of the people on the planet believe in something higher than themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
believe in a higher power, if they're, religious, just uh or spiritual or whatever, however we want to define somebody's path, you believe in something divine, but then we'll be so resistant,
Mm.
to the invisible and
Mm-hmm.
to, this other power, or even what's in ourselves, our own gifts.
Mm.
We'll be resistant to the power of the love of God and what that
Mm-hmm.
can mean and what that can do. So I find that so interesting. And I know even me saying this, even for myself, I know that, it's probably only this amount that I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so much we don't understand, but there's so much that we're resistant to.
Mm-hmm. And if I may ask, I have examples to share about my own resistance. I wonder about what that resistance feels like to you in your experience.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I have an answer, but I should have a really good answer
Mm.
because because I was like, I wanna ask you that question. That's what I was thinking before this, and I'm like, "Well, I need to be able to answer that question." But, I think it's different things. I think, one of them is, there's 2 things I wanna bring up. One of them has been my work. Right now I feel like I'm in a good flow as far as being able to make a living. I want what we're doing right now to be my living.
Mhm.
But, as far as to be able to make a living in journalism and media and writing and reporting and all of that, I'm in a good flow. And for so long in recent years until I got laid off last summer, not this 2025, but in 2024, I wasn't making enough. I couldn't, really make ends meet. And the job itself, the work I had to deliver, I, had no complaints about what I was covering, but I just wanted to, be compensated for what I thought I was doing.
Mhm.
And I was so resistant to uh just going out on my own. And, I had done that in years past in different ways. And so I just was trying to be responsible and not just say, oh, F it.
Mhm.
And Uh, so it's just, there was so much happened at one time when I got laid off that I couldn't have any resistance.
Mhm.
I just was kind of like, all right, you know, I was sad. I was sad about it, but I was still kind of like, nothing I can do about it. It's what it is, you
Mm,
know? And so I think, I'm able to see the difference. Now I can make ends meet. I am allowing God to bless me, and bring in all that God wants to bring in,
mhm.
and I feel better about myself. I'm just allowing, and I'm allowing the stress and unworthiness to be gone,
Mhm.
you know? And so the other thing I think I have resistance to is the idea that I can be loved in the way that I want to be loved in a
Mm,
relationship.
mhm.
Because like I know myself and how, people who are close to me love me,
Mm,
and know me, but in a romantic relationship, I mean, literally yesterday I was talking to God and I was like,
mm,
I don't think there's a man on the planet, God. I don't, you know? And then, a few minutes later, I felt peace around that not being true. You know,
mhm.
I felt that's not true. And I felt something different in my spirit.
Mhm.
But I just felt, I mean, because in my head, I'm like, well, why not? God gives me everything, we can have whatever we want.
Mhm.
It's just about how are we blocking it? How are we blocking it? How am I blocking it? Like I was saying before. So
Mhm.
those are two of the things that I have resistance to. And financial abundance, I've had resistance to, but that's flowing, better, as a result of what I was just saying.
Mhm.
So I've really just been trying to lean it, and I'm not, I've made, baby steps forward. I'm not saying I'm at Z by any means,
Mhm.
but that makes sense in some ways.
It does, and it shows me that you are on your path, right? And I might imagine you can let me know, but I might imagine there might be maybe conditioned messages around love, right? Of love is hard to come by, and maybe kind of going back to the message of you don't get to choose, right? So like you don't get to be your full self and shine in your most glimmering light and still have people accept you exactly for you. And as I say this, I'm also talking about into myself, right? Because I also carry a lot of those messages, and that is a lot of where my resistance comes out. A lot of my resistance is fear of my own power. Several years ago, I had a lucid dream, in fact, where a talking bush said to me, "You choose not to be aware of your true powers." And
Mm,
then when I started to reflect and wonder what it is about the fear of that, I realized that I was conditioned in a way of playing small. So something around the effect of I can't be myself in my fully loving, joyous, even infinite, um, impenetrable radiance, and still have people accept me in that because where I grew up, it was kind of a place where um, being in my full power in that way was very threatening, which is why I actually do believe my dad was actually very intimidated by my light and very critical of me in a lot of ways in seeing what was there. And so looking at myself, I can see that a lot of the fear of being in that place, similarly to what I went back to, is kind of like a fear of having the shoe to drop. And it's also just part unfamiliar, right? An unfamiliar idea that I can really be my full self and still be so rewarded and sit in the knowing that I'm so unconditionally loved. And I just made it a special intention during the meditation, especially after having someone put that blanket over me, just to sit for an hour with that realization, with a group of people of, you are unconditionally loved. I am unconditionally loved. And this is actually what it's always been like. And then like, you mean all the times that I had earlier in life and I felt that wasn't the case? Like, no, this is always what it's actually been. And
mm,
I'm blessed enough right now to be in a place where enough of the cloud cover has removed that I can see this is closer to what reality actually is. as much as I can conceptualize it from where I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something as you're talking that's occurring to me is that about your own power. So you may feel that, but you've stayed on your path,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? So
Mhm.
you're so rooted and committed, to your own power and your own path.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, thank you for bringing that in. I think that goes back to the topic, right? Like, even when there's a part of us that is able to look at and be aware of our belief in unworthiness, that in and of itself is evidence that we're not the unworthiness, right? Because obviously we're looking at the part of us that believes itself to be unworthy from a higher Christic Holy Spirit perspective, which is actually what we really are. Because we can observe what we actually really are, right? The Holy Spirit, the Christ, God just is. As that self, we don't really describe ourselves, we just know ourselves to be. And anything else that we see as separate, it means it's actually not part of us.
Mhm. Share again with everyone, 'cause, we didn't do it in the beginning, but you did it on the live, the 24-hour, what you just, got your degree in and what you do now.
hmm so I got my degree in contemplative counseling, which is contemplative psychotherapy. I went to this program in Boulder, Colorado called Naropa University. I'm still in Boulder County in a nearby town now called Longmont, where I'm now doing my practice of spiritual counseling.
Mhm.
And it's such a beautiful thing for me to be able to bear witness to the oneness within all beings and really taking to heart the teachings of A Course in Miracles. Whenever I start to have temptations to get ego and to get the twisted notion that I'm doing the healing, right? I just remember what Jesus says, and even Jesus would tell the people he seemingly healed, he actually didn't heal them at all. He said, "Your faith healed you." And so, looking at it from that perspective, I'm grateful to be in a position where the great I am in me can see and speak to the great I am within other beings, and maybe they're awakening to it for the first time in their life that they can remember. But I'm not doing the healing at all. That they're simply remembering their oneness, and their inner divine oneness is healing them. And actually, in one session last week, I actually told one of my clients, you think you're separate from where you are, and you think you lost yourself. But by the time we work together, and by the time you get to your goal, you'll realize that you were always there. And that actually made sense to her. She said she got that there was a part of her that got that. And
Mhm.
so the work is most beautiful when I can just let my ego fully step aside and know that, similarly to watching my own story, I'm just bearing witness to their story of how they already awakened and were completely healed by their own inner divinity.
Mhm. I was just about to say that, like, it's stepping into our own power and greatness. And
hmm
and so in addition to her, do you see that as a common, occurrence or theme with clients that, what we're talking about, a resistance,
I
to.
do. And it's
Mhm.
funny, right? Because it's like it seems like from my own experience, right? It took me a long time to get on this path. And when I'm honest with myself, I can see how scared I was of being on this path of serving as a clear channel to the Holy Spirit, letting the ego step aside. And I can see the same with other people, right? It's along the lines of when I encourage them to have compassion for themselves, to love themselves, to forgive themselves. I'm looking at them like, if only you knew how loved you are, if only you knew how much your radiance is shining. Like
Mhm.
everyone knows it except ourselves, right? I
Mhm.
even had a therapist years ago when I was seeing, and he told me, "You're a good guy. The only one who doesn't know it is yourself." And
Yes.
I can see that same thing with my clients. It's like, I do think for reasons of conditioning, right? We've been distorted in such a way that we think we can't be humble and still be aware of our greatness. And this kind of goes to what A Course in Miracles says about true humility, right?
Yes.
A Course in Miracles says that it's equally arrogant for us to make ourselves lesser than someone else as it is to make ourselves better, because we're really all part of that one divinity. So,
Mhm.
so when we're playing small and saying that we're less than the greatness God created us to be, we're being equally arrogant to as if we were trying to elevate ourselves above someone else.
Exactly. I, uh, Melody had asked, it was my fault because I didn't have the screen minimized. She was saying that you were making a great point, and that was a little while ago. And she just said hi, and she said, "Do you see my comments?" So so now I do, Melody. Now I see. So I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry about that. Uh,
Tell Melody I said hi. Well, oh, she can hear. Hi, Melody.
yes, James says hi. Well, she can hear you. um, she says thank you.
Thank you.
What I want to say, yeah, just a metaphor is coming to mind. I guess it's a metaphor. Is so I've been swimming lately, in the pool at the gym,
Mm-hmm.
and when I swim the laps, I find that you're trying to get from one end of the pool to the other end of the pool, and so I find that if I am in prayer, and I like to say the prayer, I walk with God in perfect holiness,
Mm-hmm.
that prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and which is short. And I find that when I do that, I'm just like, it's not that I'm swimming faster, but it's that I'm stronger
Mm-hmm.
and I'm getting there. It's like I'm there, at the other end. And
Mm-hmm.
I just noticed such a difference in the power that I feel, you know,
Mm-hmm.
versus if I'm like, oh, I just want to get to the other end of the pool, or, okay, this is the number that I'm on, so it's just really speaking to me about when I'm really in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And being in that space to me is just saying the words. It's not like, oh, let me say it 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying the words it empowers me in some way. And I know it's not just me. I mean, it's a statement to me about us. And it reminds me of what's that exercise called? When if you tell the truth.
Oh yeah, is it kinesiology?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that,
Mm-hmm.
kinesiology. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it reminds me of that. So it's, just about stepping into our power. And I think I just wanted to add I brought this up to you also, just about resistance and, just the world today and resistance to love. And I was thinking about how, we can change the world by just being in love and focusing on being the best person we can be in love and caring about each other. And
Mm-hmm.
that raises consciousness.
It does.
That does things that we can't control as humans. It takes us to something greater than us.
Mm-hmm. Because as you're talking about, in these states where we're doing this, we're not doing it as humans. We're actually operating as the Christ.
Yeah,
And the Christ doesn't have any limits in terms of the miracles that can be performed.
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And as you say, and as I see in you, you so powerfully and beautifully emanate that radiance of Christhood, right? Towards healing. And it's impossible, you can't help but even look at a situation, just like A Course in Miracles says, right? I will forgive and I will see this differently. I will forgive and this will disappear. By even looking at it with those eyes of Christ, it's like you're short circuiting in a way the illusion, and going right to the happy outcome that was always certain beyond the seeming nightmare that was seemingly taking place.
Mhm. Yeah, and the big thing to me, what you're saying is being willing,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't get anywhere. I was just talking to a friend earlier who, who's very stubborn, and I know I have friends who think I'm very stubborn, but you can't get anywhere if you're not willing.
Have to be willing. Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to see somebody differently, if you're not willing to look into, if we're not willing to look into ourselves and be willing to forgive or willing to be open, we're kind of stuck.
We are. Because think about that, right? It's like willing even comes from the word will, which is a future tense, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that we're willing to do something actually means that we will do it. And if time's an illusion, the fact that we will do it means that we already have. I was in a spiritual
Mm,
community.
love that.
Yeah, I was in a spiritual community where, kind of like as a unit, just kind of channeling some messages. One of the persons said, "We will faith," and then it was
It
almost like,
said it said we will what?
"We will faith." And so in this way, it's actually like saying, "I'm willing to have faith," but actually willing the faith into our
Mhm.
timelines. And by the end, we came up with this, together. We will faith. Faith will prevail, because beyond the illusion of time, faith already has.
Yes, yes. Hey, Sandra. Good evening. She says, good evening, James.
Good evening, Sandra.
Yeah, you know what? So you're making that point of because a lot of times when we think of the word will, we think of an intention, but really will means it's done.
It's done.
You've willed it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You've willed it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And isn't that, even just hearing you say willed it, it's just like future collapses in the past.
Mhm.
Just in that instant, what we thought was some future goal is just collapsed
Yeah.
into the past.
It's
Done.
done. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's done. And I think in the beginning that's why this topic of resistance came up for me because like I said, I think that uh in this world today we're so uh frustrated and confused and there's the unknown. And even for myself I was thinking, well, how do I get to peace? Because there's so much uncertainty. How can I be in peace? And I realized that I have to be in peace within myself so
Mm.
that, whatever happens, I can be even. I can be even and stable, within myself and be at peace and have a foundation within myself. And if we all are trying to be that way and we're all trying to care about each other, which, it doesn't seem like all of us care about each other. But those of us who do, that does change things, as
Mm-hmm.
I was saying earlier. Yeah.
It does change things. And I like the point that you're saying around first filling our own cups up, right? Because we can only step into our role of essentially offering other souls to remember to heal themselves. We can only do that when we're stepping into our own willingness
Mhm.
to be aware that the willing has already been done, right? And willing to be healed, we've already willed it to be. And I actually had a dream, a lucid dream, where I was shown that several weeks ago. And I have several members of my family I just don't talk to due to the degrees of abuse that did occur, ongoingly. And one of these members is in the dream, and as I'm thinking about, as I'm actually saying loving kindness to him, it comes to me that my vision itself is unclear. So I'm trying to be a savior, right? And meanwhile, my vision is unclear. So I get the memo and direct the loving kindness first toward myself, and in doing that, my vision clears. And I'm thinking about the part of the Bible, right, where Jesus says that I try to get the speck out of my brother's eye while not seeing the log in my own. And
Mhm.
that message is one of, it's still having grace, but it's still just being aware that I have to be clear with myself, and being clear with myself means also forgiving myself enough to see my own divinity, and then the divinity in me can see the divinity in other beings, because there's this saying, right, from Eckhart Tolle that it's not through the Holy Spirit that I see the errors of someone else. It's through my own ego that I see someone else's ego. Uh,
Mhm.
as this lucid dream continues, I'm actually in another scene where a spirit guide, realizing that I got the lesson, she's laughing with me. Something about like my ignorance, my darkness has been overcome, by the realization of first seeing the clarity within myself and then being able to see it in all. And when I ask her what her name is, she says her name is Jency Hannison, which is really funny because I make a special point when I wake up from this dream. Let me remember both of these names so that I can look them up and see what these names mean. And lo and behold, when I do, so Jency apparently originates as a Scandinavian name meaning God is gracious, and Hannison is also a Scandinavian name, also meaning God is gracious. So she literally gave me two names that have the same meaning of God is gracious, and just reminding me that yes, it's important to give that grace to others, but I first have to clear my own vision by giving it to myself.
Yeah. Wow. And when you say grace to others, you mean forgiveness is a part of that?
It's a big part of that.
Yeah.
I was guided to workbook lesson 169 actually after I had that dream, and that is the one that goes, by grace I live, by grace I am released, by grace I give, by grace I will release.
Mhm. Yeah. I relate to, a little bit to what you're describing, and I think like for me, one of the things is patience
Mm-hmm.
because it used to be I used to think that if someone did something to me, if I felt someone did harmed me in some way, I used to feel, I think, like maybe I'm supposed to forgive them right away. So I might forgive them right away, but that wasn't addressing my own healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think what I've learned to do for myself is to allow myself the space to
Mm-hmm.
feel what I want to feel
Mm-hmm.
and to move through that. And I actually did that recently, in a situation where I let myself, just be angry,
Mm-hmm.
upset, hurt, everything. And it was, me getting to a place of, okay, now I'm ready to talk,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm ready to have a conversation, but I don't really know that I have anything to say. So then I didn't feel like I wanted to wait any longer. So I thought, well, maybe I can talk and just say I don't have anything to say, but I am ready to talk. But, and that helped and that, worked itself into a conversation. But I think, patience and grace, like when you just said by grace, that grace, as you already said, is for you too.
Mm-hmm.
It's for you too. It's for us. Like we have to give ourselves that because, you know, that makes it holistic.
Mm-hmm. I like that, right? And you
Yeah.
giving me a new meaning. I mean, holistic is obviously whole, right? I like the way you said that.
Yeah, me too. I was like, "Oh."
And and thank you for bringing that in, because also, like, as you're saying, we're giving grace to ourselves, which is very much like the message of Jesus in A Course in Miracles, right? He's not saying you have to get this course in a specified time. He's not saying get it right by tomorrow. I think Clarice used to always say that in our groups, didn't she? Now I'm just all of a sudden remembering. Yeah, like
Yes.
so Jesus doesn't put these parameters of have it done by so and so. He knows that we're going to get triggered along the way, and he's patient and gracious with us. Even more so because he sees where we actually already are. Right? As he even
Yeah.
said, we travel but in dreams while safe at home. And so I can remember that also in what I call my divine reparenting moments, right? Where I can look from my higher Christic self, at the illusion of James that thinks he's holding on to something. And in that situation, it is rather inconsequential, right? Like if the shadow of myself is holding on to something, that's actually not keeping me from divinity as long as I have the awareness that there's this pseudo
Mhm.
part of me holding on to something while I
Mhm.
actually know that I'm already free. And so already knowing that nothing can take that freedom away and that natural inheritance of the reality of God, I can be gracious with the parts that in the illusion of time are still holding on, because those parts just haven't caught up with time yet and they just aren't aware that they're watching a story that's already led to perfect happiness.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. I something that I say, which I get from A Course in Miracles is, I'll pray please remove the blocks to my awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I may not know where I'm stuck. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times, I don't. So I'll have that prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a powerful prayer to have.
Mhm.
And I like that, right? Because when you sincerely and willingly pray for the blocks to your awareness to be removed, it's almost like saying, "Remove my blocks to the awareness of love that is always here, has always been here, and will always be here."
Mhm.
And furthermore, it will always be me. Will always be my true identity.
Right. Right. Love.
Hmm.
A truly holy love child of God. Absolutely. Wow, James. This was good.
Well, thank you, Adrian. Well, it always is. Like all of our conversations, and they always are in their flow.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm talking with you, I just have that knowing that there's something flowing that's really in me, but not of me, like as the ego, right? And it's just a natural resurfacing, of the one,
Mhm.
the Christ, the child of God. Is just thank you for serving as such a clear channel where that knowing can just emerge.
Well, thank you, but obviously I thank you. I'm just so grateful, that you're here and that you've been on in the past and you're here now. Just an absolute honor. Just thank you.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. This is amazing, and I'm already excited about more conversations that we'll have in the future, and more times that'll be also on
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
very amazing and revolutionary show.
Thank you. Well, don't go away because I'm going to end the live stream, but I don't want you to go away.
I'll
And
be
I want to say we have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. And that's what we want to do, little by little, one step at a time. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.